Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim. Today, we're speaking with experts working in the field of substance abuse and addiction and how their work gives hope to individuals struggling with alcohol and, of course, their families and communities. Our special guests today are Melanie Brown-Woofter, President and CEO of the Florida Behavioral Health Association, and Anna Foglia, CEO of Sun Street Centers. Thank you so much for joining us, Melanie. It's just great to see you, Anna. It's wonderful to have you here, and this is just such an important issue. I'm going to go first to you, Melanie. I'm going to set you up with this sort of idea. Alcoholism is the most common addiction in the United States, and it is facilitated by its social acceptability. The fact that we have liquor stores in our grocery stores, we have liquor stores on pretty much every corner in America. And if you look at, from a conservative perspective, over 17 million Americans report suffer from alcohol dependence or chronic alcohol abuse. It's just a huge, huge problem. So, Melanie, you're looking at me on this camera here. Mm-hmm. I'm a fairly high functioning person. I run a company. I have a responsible job. I socialize. I'm in business. I do analysis. Could I be an alcoholic?
Absolutely. You can certainly be a functioning alcoholic, not a problem. And Mark, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. It's great to see you and Anna. In terms of alcoholism, in addition to, the liquor stores being on the corner, alcohol is socially acceptable. We have a glass of wine with dinner. We have a beer when we watch the game. We have happy hour. All of those are just kind of written into our culture and certainly are acceptable. And at some point, the use of alcohol does become abuse and can lead to an alcohol use disorder when alcohol begins to drive your decisions. I need to drink before I do this. You can't function unless you have a drink in the morning, have a drink in the evening, have a drink, late into the night. And sometimes the onset is insidious. It starts with one or two drinks at happy hour. And before you know it, you're having 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. And this happens every night. And then, we're caught up in the disorder that's there. And so, and alcoholism, as with many other diseases, have stages, and you can be functioning like what you described. It can also interfere with all of your relationships, socially, in business, your work, all the way to having liver cirrhosis and severe physical illnesses that require you to have assistance to live.
So, being an outwardly functioning person doesn't immunize yourself from the physical impacts, does it, Anna?
No. Go ahead, Anna.
It's also progressive. So, you may be functioning fine in your 20s and 30s, but, things change as you get older, your body changes. And I think, like Melanie said, there's both an objective and subjective piece to this. So objectively, you could go to the doctor and he could check, or she could check your blood work or your liver enzymes. But subjectively, are people telling you and you're not listening? Are you losing relationships? Did you get multiple DUIs or even one? There's a lot of, do you drink alone? So there's a lot of ways that you can progressively get worse through the years.
I'd like to talk a little bit about human beings and whether we are all predisposed to addiction. Is this an issue that we all suffer? One of the reasons that I'm asking is that we've been listening for a while about this whole issue of addiction to these things, right? An addiction to likes. Now, we're all checking our phones multiple times a day, right? Why are we doing that? We must be getting something from checking, not just information, but we must be getting something from checking. Is the human brain such, Melanie, that we are kind of predisposed to being addicts, just we like the whatever the positive buzz that we get from serotonin levels or whatever it is, and we are kind of almost awaiting for something to come along that can hook in to that sort of good feeling. And it could be alcohol, it could be another drug, it could be a telephone, it could be a compliment. Are we kind of susceptible just by virtue of being human beings? And should that guide our behavior, particularly in our education as we grow up, so that we are better equipped to deal with that aspect of who we are?
Oh, absolutely. Almost all of our training from the time that we're born is based on reward. You do the right thing, you get a reward. You engage in this behavior, there's a reward. Same thing, with the cell phones that you're talking about. The dopamine is released, serotonin, endorphins. People who are long distance runners or engage in exercise, feel that high, if you will, afterwards. And so there are many, many things that we become, addicted to, or at least we seek the feeling that engaging in that behavior gives us. And that includes substances like alcohol, opioids, all of that is along the same gamut for sure.
And Anna, how do we deal with that? How do we help our kids from very, very young ages? How do we help them prepare for that aspect? I mean, we don't want to start off our children with fear, uncertainty, doubts. So the world is a scary place, distrust everything and everyone. But it seems that we could do a better job of equipping our young people for what is about to come as they hit puberty and the young years, the happy hour years, the party years, and so on. How do we deal with that?
Well, Mark, we were talking about this earlier. Addiction can be addiction to sugar. It could be addiction to shopping. And I think that empathy and education and what we're doing now is one way, to address this, because say 10% of the population is addicted to alcohol and the other 90% are drinking and they don't understand it. And when they don't understand it, they think it's that person's behavioral problem and they don't need to really deal with it. And the truth is, all of us are probably addicted to something. And if we can, gain some understanding, maybe the training would be a little bit better for our teenagers. So we have a huge prevention program at Sun Street Centers, and we're in multiple schools, in middle schools and high schools, but also in elementary schools, because kids in elementary schools today also know what's going on with alcohol and drugs on the street. And there's a great permissive feeling that from a parent's point of view, if I'm watching my child as a teenager drink and I'm teaching them it's okay to drink in moderation, then I'm actually doing them a service. And that you're not doing them a service at all, because the brain is still developing up into age 25. And so allowing kids to drink even small amounts is really giving them permission to drink any amount, anytime. I mean, we survey teens all the time. We have a really strong after school program for teens, and they all say the same thing. It all started with some adult, whether it was a coach encouraging them to have a glass of beer after they won a game, or at a family event, and watching their own adult brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles drinking. The early onset of alcohol use is a predictor of addiction, as an adult.
So one thing that you do is you do education, right, Anna? And Melanie, talk a little bit about your education programs. I'm going to look at other aspects of what you do. Melanie, could you talk a little bit about your educational elements?
Well, sure. Well, as Anna said, prevention is key. And so be able to provide young people with a means to build self-esteem so that they can have confidence in themselves and in self-image, because we know with social media and, just the unending visual images that are available to young people, they compare themselves to what they see on screen. It can lead to some problems, which then, causes them perhaps to engage in using substances at an earlier age. And so we really want to be able to help kids to, like I said, have a better self-image of themselves, or a strong self-image, and then teach them decision-making skills too, so that they can understand some of the consequences and make it okay to say no, instead of everybody has to give in and say this. If you're at a party and everybody's doing it, then you feel compelled to. But, give them the tools that they can say no when the time comes. And as parents, being examples, as Anna said too, maybe you do have a glass or two of wine, or you have a drink on the weekends, but, kind of not letting the kids have that until they're a little bit older. And in terms of cell phones, we as parents have to put our cell phones down and spend time with our kids. And that's the hardest thing for us to do as adults, because you are afraid that you're going to miss that email, you're going to miss that text. Oh, I have to see what's happening there. But putting our phones down and being with our children and engaging with them, having game night, having conversations at dinner, all those sorts of things really do help in the child's development.
We were just asked by one of our viewers, what do you do with the shame, the guilt, and the social stigma that comes with admission of having a problem? If I started off the show saying, could I be an alcoholic? I asked Melanie, and Melanie said, absolutely, you could be a high functioning alcoholic. Now, nobody, I will tell you, will want to employ someone who says that they are an alcoholic. It just isn't. And I would not be able to earn my living if people identified me as an alcoholic, right? And then there is the social stigma and shame. How do we deal with that? Because if me being forthright about having a problem, and then I'm in a social setting, and then I'm worried that people might notice that I'm not drinking along with everyone else. Right. And I'm only having soda water or something. And then I use that as an excuse to also drink. And how do we deal with that issue? How do we deal with the shame?
I mean, I'm going to challenge you and say, I don't believe in the premise of what you just said. I think people will hire you. I think it's the fear of the unknown of your friends and family. And so what we encourage early in recovery is to be around other people that are early in recovery. And that's what our system of social model is all about, is surrounding yourself with other successful people that are also in recovery, following the 12-step model. But I think you can be a leader in your friends and family by saying, hey, I'm in recovery and I'm not drinking. I'm happy to be your designated driver, and taking that stigma away. We do have job developers that find jobs for people all the time. And the employers know where they're coming from. And the point is that you'd be surprised how many people have this issue in their family and they don't share it. So the only way the stigma is going to be broken is by one person at a time. Just sharing that it's okay, I'm fine. Just because I don't drink, I'm still having a good time, and I'm happy to be with you. And it makes the people around them relax as well.
But Anna, I'll defend my premise. As someone who recruits leaders, chief executives, and other leaders for organizations, there are those attitudes that you describe, which are very embracing. But there are also the other attitudes that make it very difficult for people to openly admit. Melanie, just same question to you. How do you see this whole issue of us, in society, having an understanding of others and conveying that understanding in a way that reduces shame, reduces stigma, and that allows people to deal with their problem in real time as they're also undertaking a job?
Mm-hmm. I would agree with Anna. I would kind of challenge that assumption, because I really think the stigma is lessening, and that more people are actually talking about it and having conversations. Every family in America has been impacted by alcoholism, every family. Whether it's a cousin, an uncle, a dad, a mom, a teenager, every family has been impacted. And for many, many years, or up until just recently, it's been taboo to talk about it. It's something that you hide, you don't let people know about. But in the last few years, we've been more open. We are discussing, opioid use. We're discussing alcohol use, and people are recognizing that it is a problem. It is a medical illness. it's a physical condition. It's not just something you choose. It's not a behavior that you choose to engage in. That is actually a medical diagnosis, and that has really helped to lessen the stigma. And it has also the other thing that's helped is that the availability of services, and that it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to seek a service and to seek help for the problem that's there. And I would challenge you too, that if you, an employer, we are a forgiving people. And if you are in recovery and say, I'm an alcoholic, I'm recovering, the chances of you getting the job are very good.
So,
yeah, and Mark, I'm just going to add that I know you're recruiting CEOs. And so there's probably a time and the place to talk about your disability, and that may not be the time when you're interviewing for a job, nor should you have to. So I think it does start in sharing during social engagements with family and friends and coworkers, and going from there.
it's so interesting what you're saying. First of all, I love being corrected by people who are smarter than me. It makes me smarter. There is hope for me yet. But I think what you're both saying is that it starts with actually talking about it in a forthright way. If we allow ourselves and our voices to be suppressed, we promote shame. In a sense, we're talking about the obligation that we each have to just be forthright. I grew up surrounded by people, some of whom were addicted to substances, to alcohol and other substances. And I think that all of us have that kind of story. If we just sort of looked around and we looked at our relatives or the friends or our circle, there was always somebody or multiple people who had an issue. And so it isn't that strange. Maybe the time is just to bring this out. How do you deal with cultural issues? It was another question. How do you deal with the differences in different communities where there are differences in how addiction is viewed as opposed to employment situations?
We live here in the salad bowl of the country in Central California, Central Coast of California. So I have a high level of our clients come from Mexico or Central America. And it is shameful, talking about shame, to share your problems or ask for help. Plus, they come from very hardworking families. So they're working, 3-4 o'clock on the bus, working in the field, 6 or 7 at night, so their kids can go to college and make it a better life for themselves. And there's a high level of alcoholism with that kind of level of labor. And it is something where we have to engage the family members. We have this program called Family Empowerment that engages friends and family of the person that we're treating to learn what to do when the person leaves. So, maybe you do have to change your lifestyle a little bit to accommodate your loved one. That's something that they look at, and we bring the families in on the weekends and we do things together, have fun together without alcohol and drugs, to just show that you can do that. So there's going to be that level of concern from the different kinds of cultures that we work with, for sure, but there's ways to address it.
Mm-hmm. And I would agree with Anna too. And you have to respect the culture of the individual. Our providers really work hard at being able to hire professionals that look like the population they're serving, so that there's a level of trust when you come in. You also have to look at the different cultures, and sometimes, because it's taboo with many cultures to discuss any kind of substance use disorder, and so the church, or the place of worship, the priest are the keys to this. And so once you get that entity engaged into some of the peer work, the recovery work, it provides a path for recovery and for remaining in recovery.
It's very interesting. We just are completing a poll in which we asked who should be responsible for those who assist with alcohol abuse, and we've got a whole number of different responses, right? Churches, nonprofits, communal organizations, government, by providing funding and so on and so forth. Everybody agreed that employers and providing insurance and medical leave is really important.
Mhm.
Now, I have a question about that. Is how insurance, employment insurance, health insurance, does that really deal with the preventive and the treatment parts of addiction in a way that you think is appropriate? Are these medical plans, do they provide the kind of support to addicts that are required, Anna?
I was interested that you're polled and asked about the medical profession as one of the choices, because I think it lies in the hands of doctors and hospitals. And honestly, I do feel that they are woefully, very sorely uneducated in substance abuse. There's some new medical professionals now that are starting to learn about addiction, but in general, it's overlooked in the medical profession. So your question was, I'm sorry, repeat your question one more time.
Well, I think you made an actual,
Insurance companies. I know.
Better point, right? I was asking about insurance companies, and you said yes, but what about the doctors? But
yeah,
let's talk about the entire medical insurance, healthcare.
Right. I mean, insurance companies are like everything else. Some people have better insurance than others. Let's put it that way. Medi-Cal or Medicaid, depending on what state you're in, has only now come into parity with mental health services and started supporting substance abuse treatment. Oh, I don't know, 4 years ago, there wasn't funding for substance abuse treatment. It was seen, as Melanie alluded to, just a behavioral problem that you chose, rather than a behavior that is a result of a medical condition.
So because you chose it, it wasn't insured. In Florida, do you have the same kind of an issue now in terms of how?
Sure. So it depends on the commercial policy, whether it's a Medicaid policy, Medicare, all those entities are just beginning to take this seriously and realizing that the dollars that they put in for treatment and services actually yield a better outcome from them, because insurance is all actuarial based. And so when you can do some preventative work or expend dollars on treatment and services that saves you on the deep end, from that crisis care, that cirrhosis, then the insurance carriers are more likely to cover that. And we also know that the longer someone is in treatment in an outpatient situation, the better they're going to do. If they go to an inpatient facility for 20 days or 30 days and then get out and are just back into their environment, they are likely not going to be successful and stay in recovery. If they can continue maybe an outpatient program for 6 months, then the chances of success and remaining in recovery are exponentially higher than without those supports. And those supports are low cost. A lot of this is peer run, volunteer, that sort of thing. So as long as they have access to that support in the community, it leads to remaining in recovery.
I'd like to talk just very briefly about this idea of self-medication versus prescribed medication. If as we grow older, we live in psychic pain, in other words, the stresses accumulate in terms of our, how we think and what is going on in our head, and physical pain, right? We have a hurt shoulder, and then we have a hurt knee, and then, as we get older, just sort of pain becomes part and parcel of what we do, or how we live. How do we deflect from this use of substances, whether it is opioids, where we have an opioid addiction issue, or substances like alcohol or other drugs that we voluntarily take? How do we deflect from that when we might have a real issue or several real issues in terms of our psychic need and our physical needs? Melanie, what is your answer there?
Well, we live in a time, in a culture where there's always a pill for that. You want to lose weight, you take a pill. You have a headache, you take a pill. You, need nutrition, you take a pill. And we also are a society who needs instant gratification. So instead of being able to work to something, like on our phones, you instantly have to have it. So I need a pill, I need something now, rather than being able to address in a longer, term manner how to deal with that pain. Maybe we could do yoga and some relaxation rather than taking a pill. So And the one thing that we haven't talked about is that there is a number of individuals who come into addiction because of trauma that they've experienced. And almost everyone who has a substance use disorder also has an underlying mental health issue. And so being able to address those underlying issues and sort of, unpack our emotional issues that have maybe tied to the substance that we're using is really, really important. And that's the key.
Are we talking about going back to some very old and tried and true habits? Prayer, meditation, exercise, old-fashioned discipline.
Old-fashioned disciplines that certainly are supportive and certainly help to keep us in recovery for sure.
And talking things through with friends and families, or even with a stranger who might be equipped to help. Anna, how do you see it? If we're kind of built from the ground up to be addicted in certain ways, if we're built from the ground up to suffer pain and wanting to alleviate those pains, those are natural occurrences. How do we deal with that and deflect from addiction of alcohol and other substances that can temporarily solve our problem, but on the long term harm us? Do we go back to old-fashioned methods?
Well, like you said, as we get older, we're either going to get much better at self-care or not. And one of the issues we see is people, if they lose a partner earlier, they start to isolate. People that isolate, their mental health issues become worse. There are people that get into alcoholism who always drank normally their whole lives, and then in their 60s, they start drinking because they're lonely. Yes, there are basic things like exercise and meditation and journaling and reading something positive and supportive. Being with friends is terribly important, even if your best friend is a dog. I walk my dogs every morning before work. I got a dog that absolutely had to be walked to force me to walk, and it's the best start of my day. And so these are basic principles that I think people forget about. Pain can be addressed in multiple ways that are not a pill. At Sunstreet Centers, we're really not into medically assisted treatment. There is medically assisted treatment and we support it. But in terms of titrating off of it and learning how to live in remission from your addiction is kind of our goal.
So maybe some of the older fashioned approaches to living have merit for us. We can start off with education. We can start off with counseling. We can equip our children, our youth, and our adults to recognize signs and respond to them. We can create organizations like yours that can be responsive to the needs of addicts and their families. But we can also go back to some key values that has sustained us through the millennia, and try and think about our own self-care in a different way. Melanie Brown-Woofter, President and CEO of the Florida Behavioral Health Association, and Anna Foglia, CEO of Sunstreet Centers. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, sharing your knowledge. Please thank your folks, your staff, your boards, your funders, and your clients. Your clients are part of the solution, because so often those clients, as they become more equipped, part of their healing is to not only heal themselves, but also share their knowledge with others who have similar issues. No shame, right? No shame. Let's deal with it together.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mark.